Hall is one of the most historical buildings in the United States. This monumental building was where the well-known Declaration of Independence was signed. The Constitution and the Articles of Confederation were also debated and signed here. Hello, my name is Angelo Spatocco, and I currently live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I am here to explain and discuss with you the history of and importance of Independence Hall. This is the history of Independence Hall by Angelo Spatocco. I hope you enjoy. My views on Independence Hall. I have been living in Philadelphia my whole life, and I have seen and been inside Independence Hall many times throughout this time period. To me, Independence Hall represents one of the most important and iconic buildings in the entirety of the United States. I feel that Independence Hall truly brings out the fact that our country is extremely independent and is always willing to fight for what they want, because it is where some of the most important events happened, which I will go into later. Also, if any of you guys have ever been inside Independence Hall, you can see in the assembly room where all the important signings and arguments happened. Independence Hall is where the United States basically gained freedom from Britain, because our most important arguments and agreements happened right inside the building. This is why I like to consider Independence Hall the birthplace of America. Gaining independence. Before the Declaration was signed or even created, the Revolutionary War had begun during the year of 1775, with the first shot taking place at Lexington and Concord. Before the Revolutionary War was started, there was a very well-known event established by the colonists called the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party was an event in history when some men dressed up as Native Americans and boarded 3 ships in the Boston Harbor. These men threw over 92,000 pounds of tea into the Boston River. They did this because an event happened in 1773 called the Tea Act. This act gave the British a monopoly on tea sales in the American colonies. After the Boston Tea Party, the Parliament became very mad and said that the act was intolerable. After this, the governor of Massachusetts, Thomas Gage, ordered American troops to march to Lexington and Concord, where they ran into the British. This is when the first shot of the Revolutionary War was fired. The structure of Independence Hall. Around the exterior of Independence Hall, there are marble keystones above each window. Also, there is a carved wooden cornice and a wooden balustrade stretching between the chimneys. On the interior, there used to be paneling in the assembly room. However, in the 19th century, this paneling was removed, and the townspeople became very upset. Because of the fact that the townspeople were becoming mad, a man named John Hevelin was hired in 1831 to restore the assembly room. Hevelin's work was later removed by the National Park Service. Over time, there have been many changes to Independence Hall, such as the destruction and replacement of the wing buildings, also the removal of the wooden sheds, the addition of a tower and steeple, and the removal and replacement of the steeple. When Independence Hall was originally built, there was no steeple or tower. In 1750, the steeple and tower were added. In 1773, the steeple became rotted, and it was removed in the year 1781. However, it was restored in 1828 by William Strickland. During the restoration, Strickland added a clock along with an additional ornamentation. Facts about Independence Hall, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. Independence Hall is one of the most known and iconic places to visit in Philadelphia. It is located on 5th and Chestnut Street. During 1776, the United States created a document stating, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator by certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." The document was called the Declaration of Independence. When they created the document called the Declaration of Independence, they signed it in inside Independence Hall. The Declaration of Independence explained and gave a good view on why the colonists had the intention to become free from Britain. This document also stated that every individual person is equal, has rights, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There were 5 people a part of the committee. The people are Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Roger Sherman, Robert Livingston, Benjamin Franklin. Not all of the colonists signed on the same day. The Declaration had a very large effect on our country, which is why every year on the 4th of July, or Independence Day, the Liberty Bell is struck light enough to not crack it anymore 13 times in honor of the 13 colonies. In 1777, 1 year after gaining independence from Britain, the colonists adopted a document called the Oracles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation did not get ratified by all 13 states until 1781. The Articles created a very weak central government, leaving most of the power with the state government. Since the United States needed a stronger federal government, there was an event called the Constitutional Convention in 1787. At the convention, the delegates of the Articles of Confederation came up with a plan to create a stronger federal government. The delegates decided to add 3 branches of government called the executive, legislative, and the judicial branch. Also, there was a system of checks and balances added to the federal government to make sure that none of the branches had too much power. The Articles of Confederation was replaced by a document called the United States Constitution in 1789. On September 17th, George Washington was the first to sign the Constitution. 39 out of 55 of the delegates signed the Constitution. Some of the delegates had already left Philadelphia, and 3 of the delegates refused to sign the Constitution. Their names were George Mason, Edmund Randolph, and Elbridge Gerry. The delegates needed 9 out of 13 states to ratify the Constitution so that it could be passed by the government. Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison wrote 85 essays to persuade the states to ratify the Constitution on December 7th, 1787. 5 states such as New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Connecticut, and Georgia ratified the Constitution. In 1787, an arrangement was reached by the states that would not ratify the Constitution. Within the agreement, Massachusetts and other states agreed to ratify the Constitution only if the amendments would be immediately presented. The Constitution was ratified in Massachusetts, then Maryland and South Carolina on June 21st, 1788. New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the Constitution. Then it was agreed that the U.S. Constitution would be signed in Independence Hall and take place of the Articles of Confederation on April 30th, 1889. Independence Hall was originally named the Pennsylvania State House and soon came to be known as Independence Hall after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. In 1776, 13 years after the signing of Declaration of Independence, the Constitution was signed inside Independence Hall. The construction of Independence Hall started in 1732 and was not finished until 1753, 21 years after the groundbreaking. The architects of Independence Hall were Andrew Hamilton, not to be confused with Alexander Hamilton, also William Strickland and Edmund Woolley. During the summertime, when it would get really hot outside, George Washington and Ben Franklin still used to keep the windows closed so that no one knew what was going on or what they were talking about. Since Independence Hall is such an old building, it used to be worn down until in 1950 when the National Park Service decided to return it to its original appearance. Also, before the building became known as Independence Hall or even the Pennsylvania State House, it served many different purposes, such as a dog pound and a warehouse. For the memorabilia, during the year of 1816, the city of Philadelphia purchased the entire street that Independence Hall is on to stop a real estate scheme and develop a state house yard, which would have caused Independence Hall to get demolished. To me, I think that building the state house yard would have been a bad idea, because if they demolished Independence Hall, then we would have basically got rid of the most historical building in the United States. Also, if Independence Hall was knocked down, then the people of today would have never gotten to see the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, or see where the Declaration and the Constitution were signed, and what the offices looked like. The Liberty Bell inside Independence Hall. In 1751, Isaac Norris ordered the State House bell, known as the Liberty Bell, from the Whitechapel Foundry. In London, the Liberty Bell is purchased inside of the bell tower to Independence Hall. In 1751, when the bell first arrived to Philadelphia, Isaac Norris gave the bell a test ring, and it cracked. The Liberty Bell was used to call lawmakers to meetings and to gather the citizens to listen to readings of the news. It was not until 1830 that the bell started being a symbol of liberty. On the Liberty Bell, there is an inscription from the Bible that says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." People believe that this inscription was chosen by Isaac Norris in 1751 to commemorate the 50-year anniversary of William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges, which granted religious liberties and political self-government to the people of Pennsylvania. Replicas of Independence Hall. In 1893, Independence Hall served as a model for the Pennsylvania building at the World's Columbian Exposition. Also, at the Jamestown Exposition, Independence Hall was a model for the Pennsylvania building. And Independence Hall was a model for the Pennsylvania Pavilion at the 1939 New York World Fair. After these events, many structures were created to replicate or were inspired by Independence Hall. Independence Hall today. Today, Independence Hall still sits as one of the most historic buildings in the United States. After the almost 300 years, Independence Hall has not been harmed and only needed to be repaired once. It is funny to notice how much our country has come from just being controlled by Great Britain to creating nothing to something. From when the United States was part of North America, was just grass and trees, and now we have giant buildings and organizations. We also have learned to cooperate better with Europe and other countries. I am Angelo Spatocco, and I want to say thank you for listening to my podcast on the history of Independence Hall, and I hope that all you guys have learned a few things that you can use to inform others about Independence Hall. And once again, thank you for listening.